So I'd like to call the Palo Alto Parks and Rec Commission meeting to order. First off, if we could have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Cribbs, Commissioner Greenfield,
Here.
Commissioner Lemire,
Here.
Commissioner McCulley,
Yes, present.
Commissioner McDougall,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Here.
Commissioner Rectal,
Here.
Councilman Scharf.
Do we have any agendas, changes, deletions, requests, reordering relative to the agenda? Everybody's okay with that? The next thing on the agenda is oral communications. These are oral communications that are not specific to business items that we have on the agenda. I believe that Herb Borak is not speaking to an agenda item, so I would invite him to come and speak.
Good evening, Chair McDougall and Commissioners. I came to the meeting because I saw the agenda and some items of interest, and when I entered, the copies of the staff reports are not here. And I recall recently I was at another meeting of the Commission when there also weren't staff reports. You get a packet with printed staff reports and other items that are in the agenda packet. And the state's open meeting law, the Brown Act, requires that there be copies of everything you got that's not confidential available for the public to review at the meeting. And instead, all there is a piece of paper with links to internet sites. As far as I know, this is the only legislative body in the city, council, committee, board, commission that does this, and it's only been doing it recently. And so I request that it stop and that you go back to what you did previously. Thank you.
Thank you. For the attendance records, Commissioner Cribbs is
If I may, really quick. So we were directed by the clerk's office to start presenting the attachments and reports in this manner to save paper, because often we would print a lot and no one would take them. But if you would like me to go back to how it was done before, I have no problem doing that.
I'm not sure we should make that decision on the spot as opposed to understand what it takes and why that recommendation. I think I can understand that recommendation, but maybe there's maybe there's a compromise, maybe there's some other way to look at it. But I don't think we should make that decision right now. We'll publish that decision, and Herb, I'll make sure that that we send whatever answer we get directly to you personally.
And the name of the person in the clerk's office who said that?
Pardon me? Oh.
And the name of the person in the clerk's office who said that, because to my knowledge, there is no connection between that council-appointed office and the staff that is here, who reports to a different council-appointed officer who's the city manager. So I'd be interested in the name of the person, and if it was in writing, to see that from that person.
We'll be happy to provide you with the conclusion of our investigation. So the next item is approval of the minutes of the April 24th meeting. Am I missing something?
The department report?
Yes.
Kristen O'Kane with Community Services. Darren is out sick today, so I'm going to provide some updates from Parks and Open Space on behalf of Darren. So the first one is the Piers Dog Park opening was held on June 14th. It was a very nice event. The dog park was packed with people and their dogs enjoying the site, and Darren wanted to extend a big thanks to the commissioners, especially Commissioners Cribbs, Lemire, McCauley, and Chair McDougall for attending, and Chair McDougall for speaking at the event. The next item, the San Francisco San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority Flood Protection Project is starting its final construction season on July 2nd, and expected project completion is spring of 2019. The Friendship Bridge and the Creekside Trails are expected to be closed for the duration of the final construction season. For the Foothills Park Trails, we have submitted our application to the Planning Department for rerouting the trails, and we expect to get approval in late August, and our trail contractor is available to do the work in August, so hopefully we can kick that off towards the end of the summer. The Lucy Stern Brick Pathway Project, I don't know if any of you have been to Lucy Stern recently, but as you know, the brick pathways around are, because they're really, really old bricks. They're very worn. The grouting between the bricks was very worn. So we're actually in the process of redoing the brick pathways around Lucy Stern. A certain percentage of the original bricks, because they are considered historic, are being preserved and being put back in to the brick pathways. And we're doing this in a 3-phased approach. So there's always, 2 entrances and exits out of the Lucy Stern Community Center. The final note from Darren is the Baylands Boardwalk. This is going to council on June 25th, which was yesterday. So this was awarded last night for construction at council, and construction is anticipated to begin in September and be completed by January 2019, which is good news. And then I think that was all from Darren. I just have one thing I would like to give everyone just information about is on June 18th, council awarded or approved our contract with a company called Concordia to do our Cubberley master planning, or to assist with the Cubberley master planning. And then council also approved a cost share agreement with Palo Alto Unified School District. So the city and the school district will be sharing equally in the cost to do the master planning effort. So this is very exciting, and we are going to use the summertime to sort of get them up to speed, to put together our community engagement plan, which will include recruiting for what they call community fellows or citizen planners, who will be members of the community who will sort of help us facilitate meetings, help us move the project along, help us just be advocates for the project and get people involved. So I may be asking all of you to help identify some people within the community that might be really good at helping out with the project. And then the first community meeting will be in September. Commissioner Krebs?
I was just wondering how the consultants are going to initially interact with the Park and Recreation Commission, and if there will be some engagement on the part of the Park and Recreation Commission in the early planning stages. And in addition, it'll be interesting to see how a firm who comes from so far away understands very much about the process of Cubberley and the history of Cubberley. Maybe that's not important, but just curious.
Sure. So they will be, so they're in New Orleans. They have a lot of experience locally and are also working on some other projects in California. There are 2 local partners that they have on their team. One is at Stanford, and one is local. She's a consultant, but she used to be in charge of the state's education department, for lack of a better term. So they do have local representation here in Palo Alto. I do expect, this just happened, on June 18th, so I need to talk with them once on how we should get the commission involved. And I know there's either an ad hoc or a liaison group. I think it's specifically an ad hoc group for the Cubberley master planning process. And I know Natalie sent that to me the other day, actually, because I was asking who those people are, and there's 3 of you. And I apologize that I can't exactly remember who the 3 of you are, but we'll definitely have you involved from the beginning. And then, was there another question?
It's probably
Okay.
enough, thank you.
Sure.
Jeff, did you have a question? Kristen, just quickly, is this idea of citizen planners, is that sort of the same thing we've always done, or is that an effort to be more locally engaged, or?
It's different from what we've typically have done. So a lot of times there's a stakeholder advisory group, and then there's the community meetings that happen once in a while.
Right.
We decided to not have a stakeholder advisory group. Every community meeting is open to everyone, and they're actually working meetings, so they will not be, in this style of
Right.
meeting where people are talking and we're getting questions. It's people sitting around tables, working together, actually putting pen to paper. The community fellows are ones that will sort of facilitate the table discussion. So they can have their own ideas, definitely, but they're not, pushing a particular agenda as
Right.
that community fellow. But they're, of course, welcome to participate in the discussions as well. So it's just to have people who are really embedded in the community, be
invested in the
advocates
project.
and invested and can help, if we have, we're hopeful we had a few hundred people at these, community meetings that are sitting around the tables working, and we're going to need help with those meetings, and we're hoping the fellows can do that.
Hopefully that will help address Commissioner Cribb's question, but I think she might
Thank
have
you, and I
another
have
one.
just one
Go ahead.
more. Yes, so the survey that Amy did to the Cubberley tenants, when is that done, and is it going to be public information, the results, soon?
So I think they wanted, so there was, when the consultant was here, because they were here for the council meeting, and then I didn't mention the Board of Education approved the contract or the cost share agreement the next night. So they came here for those 2 items, and while they were here, they met with the existing Cubberley tenants just to introduce the project. I think there was some concern that this meant, things were going to change for them, and so we wanted them to meet the consultant right away, and they sent out a survey for the tenants specifically to complete just about their experience at Cubberley, and that is due, I think it's the end of this week or next week, that survey, and we are going to have, just like we did for the Parks Master Plan, we're going to have a website that's going to have everything on it, all of the data that's collected, all the information, meetings, results of meetings, things like that.
I know it's not directly related, but do you have a status of the zoo moving to Cubberley?
It's they needed to make some improvements. They needed to do some construction at Cubberley to make it suitable for
Okay.
the zoo, and they're doing that right now.
Okay.
I don't have an exact date of when that move will happen, but it's in the works.
Okay, that's
for
fine,
sure.
thank you.
We did have one other speaker card submitted,
And we'll invite Yoko Tanaka to come and speak for a couple of minutes. Please.
Here?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is, thank you very much for, Should I turn on or off? Or it's on?
It's
Okay.
on.
My name is Yuko Tanaka, and I play tennis, and also I volunteer as a board member of Palo Alto Tennis Club. And I would like to raise 3 points for your consideration regarding a tennis court usage. Recently, the level of frustration among the tennis players who cannot access to the public courts has been increasing. And one of the reasons, or one of the most common reasons that they express is that the city tennis court usage policy says that more than 50% of the court cannot be reserved at the same facility at the given day, given time. However, that the city has been given the reservation for more than 50% of the court for many reasons. And one recent experience was pickleball reserved 3 courts at the Mitchell Park for a drop-in, and also in addition to that, there was a senior event, special event, and they reserved additional. So that was more than 50%, and that was all weekend event. And people are saying that this is violating the city policy. Also, the tennis side, we're not innocent either. We do hold USTA junior tournaments, probably 7-8 times a year. And during that time, we reserve 6 courts, probably one day the weekend. And so that's more than, of course, that's more than 50%. So people express the concerns about more than 50% is against the city policy, but the city is giving away those reservations more than the policy. So what's going on? And those people send an email to the city. City's answer is, oh, we support senior event. And that is not a good response for them to hear. So right now, especially right now, since the pickleball, there is no designated pickleball courts, we probably have to have those circumstances for a long time until we create a plan and then survey and then build, so it takes time. So I think even if it's temporary, we should address those policy to the level that we actually can comply, or a city can actually comply with. Right now, the city is really accommodating the senior event, junior event, and I really appreciate that for all of the racket players. But at the same time, the people's frustration is also valid. So I would like to raise a point that I would like to see the policy to be updated so that we can do that.
Thank you very much.
So the second point.
No, I'm sorry, but I said you could have a couple of minutes, and you've gone on for 3 minutes.
Sorry. Two more points.
You've got 30 seconds.
Sorry. One way to reduce the tennis court reservation is that look into the USDA team reservations. I checked current USDA team reservations. Out of 10 teams currently reserved, and only 1 team have more than 20% of Palo Alto residents as a player. Some teams do not have even no Palo Alto residents as a roster players. And those people are reserving Palo Alto tennis courts, and then the tennis players in the Palo Alto community are...
I'm going to have to ask you...
Sorry, to stop?
To stop, thank you.
Okay.
I will tell you that we do have both an ad hoc committee looking into the courts themselves, and we do have an ad hoc committee that's working with staff on the usage of fields and courts and into those policies. So we're not unaware, and if you'd like to, I have your name, potentially they can reach out to you or others, but you should know that we're not unaware of some of the questions that you're raising.
Okay, 10 seconds. The Palo Alto Tennis Club is not involved in that ad hoc group, and we would like to ask that Palo Alto Tennis Club to be included in that ad hoc group.
Anytime we have public meetings, everybody is invited, and the tennis club and everybody else, and we'll just make sure that everybody is aware.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next thing is back to where I was a minute ago. And approval of the draft minutes from the April 24th meeting. Can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. That is passed. Thank you very much. So next on the item, next item is the Renzel Pond project update. Welcome, Ms. North. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Good evening. Kristen O'Kane. I just wanted to introduce Karen. I know she's been here before. There was a request, I believe, from Commissioner Moss to have her come back and just give an update on what's happening at the Renzel wetlands and answer any questions any of you might have on the progress. So I'll turn it over to Karen.
Sure. Hi, my name is Karen North. I'm the Watershed Protection Manager. I work out at the wastewater treatment plant. I'm within Environmental Services and Public Works. Some of the benefit of our Renzel Pond was a water reclamation project back in the early 1990s to recycle and reuse a lot of our plant effluent. I'm just going to give you the aerial view. Probably many of you know this area, but it's this pond area down here at the bottom. And so this whole portion, some of this might be a repeat, but for some of you, the commissioners weren't here at the last meeting, so it's sometimes nice to know. This entire area, this is the ITT property, now it's called the Renzel Wetlands, was cut off due to our landfill, which is now Bixby Park. And back in the early 90s, we tried to restore some of this. This is all previously upland, so we put in a pipeline from the wastewater treatment plant, which is right here. And about 5% of our flow flows through the Renzel wetland. Currently, no flow is flowing through it. And then there is another secondary pipe that's during high tide events. High tide, salt water, bay water flows through here and down along this channel, and then it gets pumped into Matador Creek. And it was the design for the recycled water and the salt marsh were designed to complement each other to balance out the salinity going into Matador Creek in the flooding basin. So this is what the area was back in the day in 1991. Good thing we have all these Google images that we can pull from, which is nice. This is what it was in 2002. So you can see we had a few habitat islands. It was designed to, we're trying to make it into a nice habitat for the environment. As you can see in this little corner, that island is gone. The cattails are starting to take off in 2009. We're not exactly sure. We think it's the berm deterioration. We had muskrats. We've had it breaking down, subsidence over the years. But you can see in 2014, it's basically turned into almost 2 ponds. And last year, and we know now that because of the cattails, when we started to drain it, that it did turn into essentially 2 ponds. So, and we had over 16 breaches last summer over here, and we were spot fixing them, which was very challenging because it means you have to mobilize equipment. You're going into the environment. You have to basically piecemeal this berm back together. So we decided that this was the year to fix it versus having another year of going in there and just doing spot fixes. So the last time I came to talk to you, I talked about that we were going to start commencing draining the pond. So we drained the pond. As I mentioned before, it turned into 2 ponds. So we had to get this long reach excavator in to dig a channel to allow both the north end and the south end of the pond to drain. So this is what it was looking like during the draining. This is the pipe that actually drains out the pond. So if you guys haven't been out there, it's completely dry now, which is good because we needed to let it dry out before we bring in the large heavy equipment to move the silt. The silt over the years, over 25 years, has basically silted up because the cattail growth, when it breaks down, that silt accumulates in the pond. So we have to do, unfortunately, this massive equipment, it needs to come in, and we are limited with our season and when we can get in there because it's in a wetland. We don't want to previous wetland, so if we don't want it to go in while there's a rain event, so we're very limited and it's a short season. So it's not ideal. We understand people are very concerned about the habitat out there, and we're trying to be very mindful of that while we're doing this project. This is part of our NPDES permit to discharge to the bay. So maintenance is a requirement. This we did do, Shawnee Kleinhaus from Audubon Society was concerned about birds. We had the rangers out there regularly checking on bird habitat. They did not see any, but because of her concern, we did hire certified biologists that went out, and they did find 6 nests. So we put a 30, based on the recommendation of the biologists, we put out a 30-foot buffer around them, and we are continuing to do the berm work because that's taking the longest amount of time. So we're building up the berm, making it wider, so then we can go in and maintain that marsh in the future. So not ideal, but something we need to do. So last night, the City Council approved O'Grady. They're going to come in starting end of August. So we were originally going to have them come in sooner, but we're pushing it past the nesting season to come in. And they're basically going to be moving dirt. So they're going to be pushing all the dirt from this side up to this area of the pond. And we're going to see how much we can basically, maybe this will turn into an upland area, this will turn into a shallow marsh, and then this will be an open marsh. So we're doing a little bit of adaptive management. We're trying to be mindful of our funds and see what we can get done. Because ideally, I don't want them coming in again, because we also have plans potentially to expand this wetland as well. So if we're going to go and expand the wetland, I would say in 5 to 10 years' time because of permitting, then hopefully we'd get in there and we'd just do it all at once again. So this is what it looks now. We have a silt fence out there. How many people have gone? I know Commissioner Moss has been out there. Have any of you guys driven past it? I know it's definitely not what it was before. It's changing, and we're hoping that we can at least get it back to its natural habitat in the fastest time possible. But we do have a silt fence around it. We are bringing in a lot of trucks with material, which is part of, we had a soil brokerage contract with our landfill, so we're utilizing that and capitalizing on it. That's only through till 2019, so this was our year to also get in the soil that's free, and so we're building up the berm. We have a signage out there for residents so they know what's happening. If they read it and they are wondering what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we have an active website as well. So we've gone to all the Baylands Conservation Comprehensive Plan meetings to let them know what's happening. We're coming to you to talk to you as well. This is from June of 2018. You can see it looks very different now. So it is dried out, but we don't know how thick that crust layer is, so which is why we want to let it dry as long as possible before we bring in the equipment to start moving dirt around. So this is our tentative, this is what the contractor was awarded last night from council, and we're not sure how far this will come down. We're hoping we can try and just keep it as compacted as possible, but we won't know until we're really in there moving the sediment and the silt around. This area is going to be the drying beds for the cattails. We've also talked to Shawnee and Emily about leaving some of the cattails, so we're not going to remove them all. So that will be something we'll do. We haven't made any decisions at this point in time, so we have another meeting coming closer to then when we can walk out to the site and try and identify cattails that we could keep. Obviously, we don't want the cattails in this area, this pinch point, because then we'll just have that problem yet again. So we're trying to do our best. So this is, hopefully we'll go back to what it was back in 1991 and then evolve, and the cattails will grow back in and the habitat. So we're hoping we can do this. It's been once in 25 years, and I'm hoping that I won't have to do this again while I'm with the city of Palo Alto. So hopefully we do it right and we can maintain it, and we won't have to do this again. So feel free to ask questions. I think Shawnee has some comments too. So.
Thank you, Karen. Shawnee?
Good evening. Shani Kleinhaus with the Audubon Society, resident of Palo Alto. This project makes me really, really sad. It started without CEQA because it was a maintenance project. So we were told, well, we have to fix the leaks, we have to do it now. So it's a maintenance project, we don't need CEQA. I said, what about the birds? This is nesting season. This is the most sensitive area in the Baylands at the height of the nesting season. I was told, well, we're not impacting anything. We're only draining the pool, the water. And we need to do that because when we come in after the nesting season and start doing some work with dirt, then we won't have birds nesting there. Okay, I accepted that. Then I started getting reports from birders going there and saying, why are they covering all the reeds with dirt? I went to look, and that was what was happening. Turns out we were importing soils, building berms, doing all this groundwork, and dumping the dirt on top of the reeds, and there were birds in those reeds nesting, and there were birds nesting on the areas where the soil was dumped. When I was there was a killdeer, it's a little ground nesting bird, that was running around and doing this game where they pretend to be injured, so you'll follow them away from their nest. The next day, there was a lot of soil on that site, and the bird was not there anymore. So talk about sensitivity. What I ask you, one, is learn about CEQA, and a project like that should have been gone through CEQA. There would be the mitigations that are necessary, and biologists on site. They did send a biologist after we started screaming hell, and I'm sorry, I know that you didn't intend to cause damage, but when the process is broken and there's no CEQA, because this is only a maintenance project for something that started 30 years ago or 20 years ago, then you don't have the mitigations that are necessary to protect our resources now, and the public doesn't know, and they're surprised when they see a huge project taking place when we're told that it's only the draining of the ponds that is going to happen now. Another thing which I asked then, and I understand that there's emergency fixes, but you say you don't want to come back there again. The whole project that you're going to hear next is about how do we design this area. This was an opportunity to look at something in a much bigger framework, and I'm not only doing maintenance on a project and talk to me now about leaving some refuge for the animals so they all, not all the reeds will be gone and so on. This was an opportunity to actually look at how do we do a project and enhance the environment at the same time. And it wasn't. It's not that it's not going to be, but it's still not planning to have a real ecological design team work on this project. It's a maintenance project. And when I sent a letter about the next item, which is the Bayland Comprehensive Plan, you have a list of 13 projects that are capital improvement, and 3 projects are enhancements, and we talk about balance. We need to start looking at every project as how do we balance this project, and this was the ultimate opportunity that happened in a very sad way as far as the birds are concerned. So I don't think there's anyone who means to do something that is not necessary, or they needed to fix the leaks. There are things that need to be done, but there are too many breaks in the system. And so all of you, please, if anybody proposes a project, whether it's public work or anybody, and it touches on a park, insist on CEQA so you know what's going to happen, so you make sure that everything is right, and is not, and accidents to kill deer don't just happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Does people on the commission have questions for Kieran? David?
I went by the pond and was really surprised at how significant, how huge this project turned out to be. And I guess I didn't quite realize it. So I want to emphasize what Shani said about maintenance projects versus something that requires environmental review. And what's going to come out of this also is there's a path all the way around that could become a path for people who want to walk or bike or walk their dogs or whatever around there that didn't exist before. And so it really should be covered by the Baylands Comprehensive Plan, and so that we deal with it, with that new feature and others. I strongly believe that that pond should be open to the public in some way to allow an observation deck or whatever to be able to look out at that, and I'd like to see birds there too. I've always wondered why it wasn't open to the public for bird viewing. And so I would like to echo what Shawnee said about taking the broader view with this project. I don't know what we can do at this point, but as soon as it's done, I want to put all the birds back. So that's my comment.
Anybody else have questions, comments?
Sure.
Thanks, Ryan.
Karin, could you perhaps tell us what your plan is for mitigation with respect to the birds? So you've now put up these 30-foot,
So, yeah.
is it a barrier of some sort? Or?
So if you go out there, there are these orange 30-foot, but they're 30 foot away from the nest. That's what the biologist recommended that we'd hired. And then to maintain those, before O'Grady comes into the actual pond, we'll have a biologist come back out again to ensure that there's no new nests and that the nests have been, basically the nesting season's over, and then we can go in and remove the reeds. So we've been, I know we haven't done the CEQA, but we're trying to do all the, since it's a maintenance project, I'm wearing my environmental hat, we're trying to do our due diligence on making sure that we're looking for birds, looking for nests, mitigating any potential impacts. The area around the pond for the maintenance, basically will be a road. It will be up to your decision to determine if that becomes part of the trail system. But we do need a road for maintenance because part of the reason why it was not opened up, it was an ankle turner with the berm. It was completely divots and falling apart. I just want to respond a little bit to Shawnee's concerns. I originally had the plan of a larger vision with the Valence Conservation Comprehensive Plan. We wanted to incorporate it in, and that started, and then we also had all those leaks. So we are still looking at the larger vision, but we also have to maintain our current infrastructure. And I know it's odd that a pond is infrastructure, but it is. It's part of our treatment process. We do get some nutrient removal, and it's in our actual permit that requires us to have a certain percentage of our flow go there to reduce the flow going out into the San Francisco Bay. I would not say this is my favorite project. I'm just trying to get it done and do it the most environmentally sensitive way I can. So keep on asking me questions because it challenges staff to come up with strategies on how to do it. We feel like we've talked to the biologists. We didn't have a biologist on staff. We were relying on rangers prior to that. Where we'll bring the biologist back out again. If you have any other recommendations, we are open to them. We have talked to the consultants for the Valence Conservation Comprehensive Plan. That's who is our biologist for assessing the birds. So we are, this is an adaptive management strategy. None of us have ever had to deal with a large freshwater pond that was wastewater for maintenance. So.
Yeah, no, certainly, I think we all appreciate that you're trying to be thoughtful about all this. Are there other wildlife mitigation issues that need to be
So for full disclosure, we did find fish, and some of them got moved into the flooding basin before they died. And then CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, told us to euthanize the rest of the fish. So any fish that was left were euthanized.
And is there any plan to restock fish or something like that?
The fish probably were not naturally there. They probably got stocked over the past 25 years. We're not sure how they got there because it's not hydraulically connected to the creek. It just, the water flows into the creek. Creek water should not be flowing back. So it's been a fun project, let me tell you.
You don't have fish that come from the wastewater treatment plant?
No. Then we're failing miserably if we have fish coming from the wastewater treatment plant.
David mentioned the inevitability, or suggested the inevitability of there being a path around there. You said there would be a road, but whether it became an open path, because I would see at some level that area is just not that big, and wishing for the birds to be there, but allowing your dog to be there at the same time is a little bit of a contradiction.
So that's what I'm saying. For Parks and Rec Commission, they can determine if it's going to be a maintenance road or it's going to be allowed to have a path, and that has not been determined at this point in time. So we're just trying to create a maintenance road, and then obviously we know that people may take that path, but there's ways to deter folks from going there if we do not want people going down around that pond. So it's really up to us. you guys to make that decision.
And would that decision be made in the context of the comprehensive plan, or
Correct.
would that be made separately?
No, this is part of what's looking into the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jeff?
Yes, thank you. So I appreciate that there was no ill intent in all of this, and the intentions were well-founded, and proceeding without a CEQA study because this was a maintenance project was legally what was permitted. My question is, what have we learned from this, and how can we improve in the future? And is there a policy change that we should be considering to protect against something like this happening in the future? So I'm interested in the staff perspective.
Oh, definitely. If someone was to tell me that we're under a maintenance exemption, and I would now, based on my knowledge base, I would absolutely say no. So I would have, now I'm a wiser staff individual, I would require us to get this. So this was something that we've learned from, and we're doing the mitigation as we go. I don't think it would have really changed the outcome of what we would have planned on doing, except maybe we would have had a biologist out there sooner.
So help me out here. For a maintenance project, is a CEQA study not officially required?
That was our interpretation, and my interpretation has changed since we started the project.
So we now believe that a CEQA study should be required?
If I did a future project so that way if Shawnee asked me questions or other people ask me questions, just for my own basis, I would require. I don't think it's necessarily required by law. I just would do it regardless. Does that make sense?
Sure, that makes sense. My concern is...
Am I being clear in terms of, I don't think, we were going under the premise that that it was not required for maintenance. But now what I know in my knowledge base, I believe still legally it's not required for maintenance, but I would probably still require us to do it.
And so it seems very clear that you're once bitten, twice shy, and you would certainly not proceed in the same manner. But what's to stop someone else, if someone else is in a similar situation and a CEQA study isn't officially required, is there something that we should be doing as a body to consider a policy change?
I think the policy change has already happened. I don't think this will happen again.
And where has the policy change occurred?
So basically, we've been told that if we were to do any other future, because of concerns from public, that we would do CEQA documentation. So it will happen. If I'm Phil, I work for Phil, so yes, it would be happening again. So.
Thank you.
What was the reason for not doing CEQA? Was it a cost issue or a schedule or?
Cost issue, time issue, maintenance. We were under the gun of trying to get this completed during the dry season when we were trying to do the larger aspect of it, and we realized we didn't have the cost to actually go out and do the larger study of the whole region. So we are trying to limit costs and get it done. And as you know, our council is trying to limit every cost angle, so we're trying to do our best as city staff of not spending money when we don't need to spend money.
Yeah, every dollar that you spend is something that maybe could be used elsewhere, but
Correct.
you also don't want to overlook important things, so it's a tough situation.
Right, which is why, in my mind, we're doing all the mitigation we would be required anyway for CEQA, which is why when I was wearing my hat, we were taking the rangers out there, we had the biologists go out there. So those are all the mitigations that would be laid out in a CEQA document anyway.
Do you have a rough estimate how much money it would have cost and what kind of schedule it would have impacted?
It probably would have added about a year and probably around $100,000.
Okay, and the berm, could have it lasted another year, or would we have to
No.
go?
The berm was already, we had 16 breaches in the berm the previous summer, so no, couldn't have lasted another year.
Okay, so in hindsight, if we want to do CEQA, would we then gone in and fixed that berm for that final season, or what would we have done? What would have been the best option?
Or we
in
could have just
hindsight?
drained the pond and left it and not done any kind of work, but then that would have been 2 seasons with the water being out. So, this is where we're stuck as staff trying to make the right decision because we couldn't have left it in there and kept on going and patching it while we were trying to do our CEQA.
Okay.
So, we have the cards that we're handed. We try and do our best decision-making process. I have a master's degree in environmental science. I wear my environmental hat. I've been with the city since 2001. We are trying to do the best we can. We consult with our consultants as well because they're part of the Baylands Conservation Comp Plan, but our experience getting through procurement and getting CEQA done is a much lengthier process, and it's at least a year, if not longer. And then just to get the consultant on board for the moving of the dirt took around 4 months.
Okay.
So it's timing, unfortunately. I wish things could go quicker, but this is the city process that we're in.
You mentioned these cattails and reeds. Are they all native vegetation?
No.
They're non-native?
No, it's a freshwater pond, so cattails are going to grow wherever they come. So,
But this is naturally occurring, if you had a freshwater 100 years ago.
if you had a freshwater pond, and cattails would naturally occur. Baronda Lake has cattails in there. They have a maintenance. They go in every year, I think, or every 5 years and clean out the cattails. So we know we're going to have to do some more maintenance on it.
So that was my next question. What prevents these from doing the same thing that just happened?
Well, one, by having a road around the perimeter, we can keep a better access to it, because before our guys were using goats and machetes to actually get to the interior of the pond.
So if we start having a choke point now with cattails, what would we do?
We would do it from the water, similar to what they do at Baronda, where they go in and they can harvest a certain percentage of it, but not remove all of it. And so that would be our next strategy. But prior to doing that, I would get another CEQA documentation with maintenance agreements all built into that.
Okay. Also, you mentioned the pipe, the saltwater pipe.
Yeah.
What's the condition of that? Is that?
So that's this is part of why it's part of the Baylands Conservation Comp Plan, because that is another part of the wetland that needs some maintenance because it's silted up. We've historically had our operators go out there and hand dig the channel, and we need to actually dig it out properly. So that will be part of the next stage, which is why I say it's 5 to 10 years to see when we can get money to look at the entire area. And then we also, you see the remnant slough, which is right here. We also want to see if we can connect that. So that's part of the Baylands Comprehensive Plan. So we're trying to look at the area holistically. Ideally, we would have done the whole thing and then done CEQA and done the entire pond at the same time. But as I said before, our timing just didn't match up with the breaches and the leaks.
So when you talk about what's gone down in 10 years, do we have a good idea what we want to do, or is our options are open and we have to do a lot of planning?
We have some options available. AECOM, the consultant, is laying out some and looking at what makes the most sense for that area, utilizing their experience. So we're not there yet, correct? It's coming up in the timeline, Petra is?
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
So I'm taking their thunder. So they're actually already have it on their agenda to talk to you about it, so.
Okay, thank you.
David? One more comment based on what we've just heard, and that is that the pond was always considered just a part of the wastewater treatment plant, but it is, as we now know, after the fact, it is not just part of that, like your cement line tanks over on the left. It is now part of the Baylands Open Space Preserve and must be treated with the respect that deserves. And so what you're doing now is you're building this pond for the next 25, 30 years before the Baylands Comprehensive Plan is complete. And I find for instance, I would like to address, do we put an island or two in the middle there? Do we, that maintenance road, do we make sure that you have those metal barriers so that, with a lock and key, so that only maintenance workers go back there, and that we allow that other part of the road to be a path sooner rather than later? All of these things for the 25-year plan for this covered in the Baylands Comprehensive Plan that won't be completed for another year, but you're working on it now. And I worry that you might have to go back and do this all over again, and I don't want that to happen.
If we do, we do.
We sort of are between a rock and a hard place. Can we get the Baylands Comprehensive Plan, can we do some work on that ahead of time regarding that part of the Baylands before you're done?
So the consultants have been out prior to the work, during the work. They're planning on incorporating it in. They're also looking at the larger vision if we wanted to increase the pond size, what makes the most sense for that area. And so it will definitely be incorporated in.
I would like the Baylands Comprehensive Plan Ad Hoc Committee to sort of have a discussion in the next month or two, just to hear what is going to be, what the pond is going to look like after they're done, even though the comprehensive plan is not going to be done for a year.
It's going to be done by the end of the year. And it's incorporated in.
I think we're going to have a discussion on the
think you are.
Baylands Comprehensive Plan in a few minutes, and I think hopefully we can address that problem there.
Okay.
If nobody else has any questions, I would like first to thank you for not just your presentation tonight, but I think your very conscientious efforts to look after the environment. I think everybody's aware that you have not been doing anything malicious here, that in fact you've been working hard to protect it. And in fact, you're dealing in a difficult situation that I think we have in the whole Baylands, all parts of it, where it's been re-engineered. In several cases, we're trying to protect nature that isn't even nature. And so I think that provides a double challenge. I do agree that anything we can do to holistically look at what's happening so that we're not making individual decisions, I think that's important, and I think we'll hear more. I hope we'll hear more about that in a minute. On the question of the cattails, the only thing that came to mind there was, if in fact there's culling going on, how do we, and if in the meantime birds have come back, hopefully, how do we make sure that we're not culling where the birds have come back? And I don't know that you need to answer that question, but that's...
I think I'm learning a lot about this habitat. So the plan would be to do a water culling of the cattails during non-nesting season. We unfortunately couldn't do everything during non-nesting season just because we're off nesting seasons during the dry season, which is when we need to be out there. So that would be my strategy.
The last comment I'd like to make is I share Ms. Kleinhaus's enthusiasm for CEQA, but when you say that policy's been made, I think when you mentioned Phil's name, you're saying that Phil's now decided we're going to do that all the time. I'm not sure how we would have that as a policy. Is it a policy if we're dealing in more than an acre, or more than 3 acres, or if we're dealing in wetlands, or we're dealing in saltwater, or we're dealing in... I don't know how we would have that kind of policy. And so I think it deserves more discussion to make sure that it's everybody's deliberate awareness of when to ask and when not, or when to say, Corinne, we trust you to do this analysis, or the consultants that you bring in, versus CEQA. But I think Shawnee's right. Getting it on the tip of everybody's tongue is probably more important than it being a specific policy.
So it's definitely on the tip of everyone's tongue now. Thanks to our project, it's on the tip of everyone's tongue. So I would actually, the planning department and the city attorney's department it's definitely been a policy change.
Okay.
So I can assure you that the Public Works Department will not be doing anything again if they think that CEQA should be potentially there. So we are going to be cautious and not
So,
distinct the
so it
maintenance
is a
agreements.
policy that the city has put in place, and maybe at some point we should just ask if somebody would come and inform us of how that works or something.
Sure.
That would probably be useful.
Yeah, we have
at some
two
point.
very strong CEQA folks in the planning department, well, actually, many in the planning department and our city attorney's office as well,
Okay.
so.
Thank you for
yes.
that. Great. Thanks for that clarification. With that, I'd like to thank you for your, as I said, appearance tonight and the work that you've done.
And we can come and give you guys, if you want, an update because as I said, this is an adaptive management since we aren't sure exactly once we bring in the heavy equipment at the end of August. So I'd be happy to come back again and tell you guys where we're at. And I'm hoping that we can fill the pond by October. That's my goal. During the dry season, get it done, and then fill the pond up again.
So we just fill you in for a permanent spot on
That's
the
fine.
agenda for the next.
That's totally fine. I would much rather have you know that we're full disclosure. We have nothing to hide. We put everything on our website. We're not trying to do anything under the radar.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's a very visible area that we all drive past or walk past, so
Right.
I'm not hiding anything.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, sort of a natural next agenda item is an update on our Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan. And I'd like to introduce Petra Unger and Diana Edwards from AECom, who have been working closely with Darren and a lot of stakeholders who are interested in the Baylands on moving this forward. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Good evening and welcome. Nice to have you with us, Darren.
Good evening, and thanks for having us. And we're happy to provide an update on where we've been with the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan and where we're going, what the schedule is, and how that interacts with Karen's projects and others.
Great, thank you.
So my name is Petra Unger. I'm the project manager at AECom. We're the consultant preparing the Comprehensive Conservation Plan. And with me is Diana Edwards, who's the deputy project manager. And both of us have been very involved in this from the very beginning and on a day-to-day basis, coordinating with Darren. Oops, no, so. How do I vote? Yeah. Not that one. And then- I did. Okay. So we, as you heard, we were planning on having Darren here presenting with us, but he's out today. I believe he's been giving updates to the commission on a regular basis on where we've been. And I introduce myself and Diana. So on today's agenda, I'll give you a brief overview of what the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan is, our planning process and steps completed to date, and then where we're going, ongoing activities, and also the timeline. So what is the BCCP? It's a comprehensive conservation plan to manage the Palo Alto Natural Baylands for the next 15 years and beyond. And it's supposed to be ecosystem-based and comprehensive, incorporating both the habitat and the natural resources out there with environmental education, art, and uses that are out there now. And it's also supposed to take current and future projects into account. There's a lot of projects going on around it and in the area, as we've already heard today. We've heard updates on Francisco Creek and on what's going on at the Renzo Wetlands, and there's other projects as well. And then there's current trends and new things that we're taking into account, such as climate change and other opportunities. And then it also includes some site-specific aspects for two of the properties out in the Bayland, one of them being the Renzo Wetlands ITT property, and the other one being Bixby Park, where we're doing some more site-specific planning. Overall, this is supposed to be an 18-month process, and we got started about a year ago, last June. And other aspects of this, we're incorporating the 2008 Baylands Comprehensive Master Plan updates. So over the years, there's been lots of work out at the Baylands and a lot of work going into that master plan. There's a lot of excellent information in there. But there's also a lot of new data and new trends and new projections that we're incorporating. And stakeholder and public outreach is an important aspect of this planning process, as I understand is with pretty much any project in Palo Alto, which is great. And so our scope of work included 12 distinct tasks that we're completing. Doesn't want to do it for me. I'm sorry here. There we go. All right. Did I skip one now? No. All right, sorry about that. So the first task that we did was to complete a work plan that laid out what those steps are, what time frame they would be completed in, and what is part of each of those ones. Our first deliverable to the city was the existing conditions report, where we basically documented what is out there now, what are the habitats, what kind of species use the baylands. We did some original habitat mapping. We interviewed the rangers. We spent a lot of time with Darren, who knows the baylands inside out like no one else, as I'm sure you're aware of. We talked a lot to the folks doing the restoration out there, the rangers, people leading the nature walks. We read all the literature, and then we produced a report that was the existing conditions report. We also developed a stakeholder engagement plan that laid out at what stages in the planning process we would engage the stakeholders and what that would look like. There are meetings, and there's opportunity to review interim deliverables and provide feedback. And then we started with our first stakeholder meeting last October, which was basically, you can see a picture of that here, and was kind of an early brainstorming, determine different people's vision for the BCCP and what it should look like and what should go in there. We also then completed a summary of that first stakeholder workshop that was shared with the stakeholders and also posted on the website. And then we became aware of that these projects being planned at the Rensselaer wetlands, so we pulled that particular part of the Baylands plan forward so we could incorporate that and coordinate with Karen. Just as you've been directing, you were hoping that that would happen now. So prior to our second stakeholder workshop, we had a tour out at the Rensselaer wetlands where we invited the stakeholders to join us out there and did a comprehensive tour, walked around, looked at the issues out there with the marsh and also the ITT buildings and the property that has become parklands recently and that we're addressing in more detail here. And then we had a stakeholder workshop specifically on Bigsby Park and the ITD property, and also developed the themes from that as a kind of a meeting summary. We also launched the project website where we're posting these themes paper and interim deliverables that have been completed. So if somebody cannot attend the meetings or chooses to, just review the deliverables, they can go on there and get an idea for what's been completed. And then we had our third stakeholder meeting in February of this year, and that one was an evening where by the second workshop we opened it up to the public because we wanted to get a broader input, and there was some desire by several of the stakeholders to have this open to anybody who wanted to come. And then we also got a request to maybe hold an evening workshop instead of daytime to enable a broader group of people to come, and that was well received. A lot of people thanked us for doing an evening workshop as well. And also, we were trying to get some broader input from some of the users out there. So we launched kind of a survey that, which is some very simple questions about, what do you like at the Baylands? What do you like to do out here? How often do you come out? What are your favorite things? What are your issues of concerns? And that was administered on-site by the Baylands Rangers, and we've gotten some pretty good feedback from that as well. So with all of that, and then the input received from those stakeholder workshops, we developed a draft vision, goals, and objective document, which basically lays out here's the main themes that people want to see for the wetland, for the Baylands, and how we would go about developing that. And then also, as you may be aware, the city has a stipend for some artists in residence that was allocated to this planning process. And so they have been recently brought on board, and in fact, they're here tonight. So we have Mary O'Brien and Daniel McCormick right here. So that is through the city's art program led by Elise DeMarzo, and so they came on board to basically provide an art overlay or art aspect that interacts with the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan. So when they came on board last month, we had a meeting with them at the Baylands and a tour where we basically shared information about what we're each doing, what stage of the plan we're at, and how we can interact. And then we met with them again today, this afternoon, on site to discuss some ideas and such. And so we also have conducted site visits to explore some of those issues at the ITT in Bigsby Park. And then we're doing this presentation today as an update. So ongoing activities, so on a very regular basis, we coordinate with the rangers or with the stakeholders. They've been providing feedback on some of the deliverables we've had, and we incorporate those comments and feedback. We've also been coordinating with the Historic Resources Board because, as you may be aware, at the ITT property, there are those, or former ITT property, there's the buildings that are of historic significance, and there's some discussion as part of the BCCP what should happen with those buildings. And we're coordinating with the artists in residence, and then also Kathleen Jones, who's the head ranger out at the Baylands, has been a guest instructor at a local community college where they did parks planning, and they chose a plan for the ITT property as their class project. So she shared some of the feedback or the project results that we've gotten from that class, and we're looking at those for ideas too, just to see what the local students came up with. So here's some examples from the artists in residence, materials, and some just ideas. General feel is that whatever art out there is an overlay should be natural and in nature and fit well into the whole theme of the Baylands. Some additional materials on previous projects or things that might be appropriate. Activities here. So this is all things from Elise, who has been leading that, Elise DeMarzo with the city, who has been leading that artist in residence overlay. So next steps. So right now we are preparing another chapter of the plan that's called the Draft and Final Opportunities, Limitations, and Best Management Practices. And actually we have a draft of that. And so this is where we present, based on everything that's out there and what people would like to see, what are some of the best management practices that should be implemented out there. And so that can be anything from related to habitat and wildlife and invasive species management, user impacts, user opportunities, also with the art and so on. And then we're also working on the chapter on the sea level rise and climate change. So that's currently underway. And we'll develop from all of this material a draft action plan, saying that we know all this, how do we, move forward and implement some of those parts. And then we will have put all those chapters together and have a draft BCCP and a final BCCP, and both of those will be presented to the commission as well. And the timeline for those here, you see the sea level rise paper will be done by July. And then the draft plan should be done by September, and then the final plan will be done by the end of the year. And so in terms of the ITT and Renzel wetlands, the use scenarios, so you were asking what we're doing there. So we're currently in the process of developing 3 kind of alternative scenarios that explore what could happen at the ITT property. And we're looking at different options for access, trails through there for reuse or even removal of the buildings. What are the options there? What kind of habitats can be expanded or created there, and also what kind of connections to Bigsby Park could be done there. So we've visited last month when we toured with the artists. We had our landscape designers and restoration ecologists visit the site and look at it firsthand and come up with some ideas, and they're now translating those ideas into some conceptual drawings. And I believe that Darren will be presenting, sharing those with you in the not-so-distant future. And I already touched on the draft and final plan outline on when we do. And then as far as Bigsby Park, so there's an interim management plan for the park, and there's some aspects that we're supposed to finish or complete as part of this plan as well, and that relates to habitat management out there and invasive weed control, to parking and circulation, to the interpretive signage, and also to the use of the composting facility parcel that's part of Bixby Park. And with that, I'm be happy to answer any questions, and Diana as well.
Should I assume everybody might be interested? I'll start at one end. Jeff?
Sure, I'll begin. Appreciate all the work that's been done with this, and excited to get this going. It's such a beautiful area.
I'm sorry, Jeff, before...
Yes.
Yeah. Do we want to do the commission comments, or do we want to do the public comments? Johnny,
You should
would
do
you like
the
to comment,
public,
please?
yeah.
Sorry, Jeff.
Thank you. Shani Kleinhaus again with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and a resident of Palo Alto. In the last 2 years, I had the opportunity to participate in 3 stakeholder groups for parks master plans, the one that Palo Alto did, as well as San Jose and Cupertino. Those are not done yet. I still participate in that process. In all of the surveys and everything that the cities have asked, all the residents always prioritize nature as the highest priority that they want to see in their parks, not only in parks that are natural, like we're very lucky to have, but in every city parks. People really prioritize. They want to see butterflies everywhere. And so the reason I'm saying this to begin with is because it's really hard to implement. It's very difficult to know because people are not trained as how to create and do nature. They create how to do landscape ecology, landscape architecture, how to put trails in a place, how to do all these things that bring people. How to bring nature back and regenerate it is not that simple. This plan is called a comprehensive conservation plan. It's not called a comprehensive access and trails plan. It's not called art plan. It's a conservation plan. I'm not saying that it's not important to look at those things, but art suddenly is an overlay that was sprung upon us. And I'm not opposed to art necessarily, but I don't know that that's the best place for it. It's so beautiful. Why don't we have art where it's less beautiful? I mean, we can do both, but I think it needs a lot more consideration of detail, and connectivity is not always good for nature. You connect something in nature, for people you disconnect it from nature often. You put a road, you connect it for people, the creature now have to find a way across. So when you think about, if we talked about the project before, we need those gates that Commissioner Moss said. We need them now before we expose the whole perimeter of the pond to traffic. Yes, we want people to get there. We want them to enjoy the ponds, but maybe only half, so they go and see half of it, and the other half is for the wildlife and the birds. And which half, I don't know. So these are things we need to think about already. And when you look at all these things and you have all these inputs, sometimes you get everybody wants to do something. And I think in the stakeholder meetings that I participated in, the ultimate wish of the people that have the background and history with the Baylands was to really think about how to minimize the intrusion, the segmentation, the fragmentation of the habitat, how to really create a very viable ecosystem and allow people to kind of glimpse in and enjoy it, but not build it for the people, build it for the wildlife, because they have almost nowhere to go anymore. We're developing the edge of the bay so fast, and the sea is rising, there's very little areas for them to still go into. So the focus on the ecology really needs to be, it speaks to people. People understand it, even when they want access. If you tell them there's no access here because there's something going on here, the gray foxes need a place to breed, the birds need a place to breed, they understand that. They accept it and they love it. So please, preservation, comprehensive conservation plan and restoration plan. It's not a BCDC, not a development and conservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, I'll let you start over again.
Sure. Just appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and excited for this project and gaining a better understanding. Actually, one of my main comments is also about the art, and now understanding the permanence when there's installation put in, but to be very judicious or very careful or have an understanding of both future use of a place, but also impact to the environment, I think is extremely important, because as we've learned with these art installations, especially the permanent ones, when they are there, it's very difficult to adjust or change or do something else or modify. And I think as we move forward with the thought of art, especially the permanent art, to be just how we study that and how we think about that is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point well taken. And in meeting with Mary and Daniel, it's very clear that they have a very soft and natural touch, and that they're very aware of the sensitive nature of the habitat and how that all relates. And also, I am a scientist by training, I'm a biologist by training, and as I was telling them today, I think sometimes when we, in our conservation science or biology, write policies and best management practices, that echoes with a certain kind of audience, and a kind of an artistic interpretation or relation to something echoes with a whole nother type of audience. So I think there can be a very subtle overlay and a way to meld those two together.
Sure, and just to underscore, if it's a permanent installation, what permanence means,
Right.
because we've gained a greater understanding of permanence with artistic installations.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to ask, first of all, it's great that you're doing this, and the project is big, and it's very important. It's certainly important to everybody in Palo Alto and outside Palo Alto as well, so thank you. I think we talked a couple of months ago about engaging, along with the stakeholders that exist now, the youth of the community, going out to high schools, perhaps the environmental classes at high schools, both private and public schools, and also the youth council. And I just wondered if there had been an opportunity to do that.
We have not gone out to the public high schools or anything like that. The closest we've come to that is the input from the community college class that has come from.
And I saw that in the report, and I thought, oh, well, good, because it's a great source. But then it feels like I'd really like to see that the youth in our community have a voice to talk about this, at least, because they're the ones that are going to be using in the future. So they always have good ideas about things. It's a different perspective. So if there's an opportunity to do that, I would really support that. And the second question is just about, when do you know about the cost of the comprehensive plan? Will you ever put a price tag on it to say, this is what, if we do these things, or if we don't do these things, this is what it's going to take to keep the Baylands the way the stakeholders want it to be?
As far as our scope goes, the only part that has a price tag sort of it, I think, for the implementation of those different opportunities or scenarios at the ITT property, saying if we went with option A, this would be a ballpark sort of thing. This, if we went with option B, this would be a ballpark. So I think a good way to do that is sort of by unit sort of thing, saying, okay, if you build, X feet of trail this way or that way, that's kind of the cost. If you want to rebuild a building and do that sort of thing. So those concept scenarios are supposed to have some ballpark costs associated with them.
Good. That'll be good. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Were you at the stakeholders meetings?
Yes.
Can you give us some flavor? Was there a uniformity of opinion, or were people pulling in all directions?
I would say what you heard from Shawnee, that the majority of the stakeholders that attended those meetings is very interested in maintaining the natural side, leaning towards the restoration, protecting the wildlife, keeping them natural, or making them more natural again, is definitely. reverberating with the majority of the stakeholder outreach. There were some other, there was some interest in access for the users as well. We also had a couple of people from the airport, city airport, join us on a couple of the meetings, and they certainly had some ideas of other things that could happen kind of in the larger part. But generally, my feeling for what I've heard so far is that people are basically very happy with having this resource out there and wanting it preserved. And we've actually haven't heard anybody, even from the user survey, saying you have to do this totally different. Everybody really likes to have this at their doorstep and wishes to see it preserved and wishes to see it in a natural state, much like you've heard from among yourselves tonight as well.
Okay. I really have a love-hate relationship with Bixby Park.
Mm-hmm.
It is, the views are wonderful up there,
Yeah.
but it's so artificial.
Yes.
What are your thoughts of Bixby? What options do we have for Bixby?
Well, Bixby, as you know, is a closed landfill, and as such comes with a lot of stipulations that are beyond, wishes of what can and cannot happen out there. Most of that is related to the depth of the soil out there and the cap and what is allowed to grow and not to grow. So it's somewhat limited in that. As you're probably aware, there have been the habitat islands installed out there, and they're providing a little bit of variation. And in some areas of the park where they have the engineered soils, there's a little bit more opportunity for having a broader range of plants grow with a little bit deeper roots and those sorts of things, and we're exploring those concepts for those areas. Overall, it's a very regulated environment, and so it's a tough choice to, I think, before it was built as a landscape, it was a bayfront marsh, so I don't think it'll ever go back to that, but there's definitely some opportunities for some enhancements on habitat. So we've been discussing potential habitat for owls and other things that have been out there, what can be done in terms of maybe a little bit more shrubs, maybe a little bit less manicured and everything, and we're going to look at the whole regime of mowing and all of that out there. But it's also...
Have you come up with any options that we haven't thought of? I know Darren has the plan of possible things and the evolution of Bixby. Is there any new options that you've come up with?
I wouldn't say entirely new as to this will be, very different than it used to be, but I think there's definitely opportunities for enhancing, some of the habitats out there. And like Karen mentioned, to maybe reconnect that dry wetland that's out there. On the foot of Bixby, next to the creek there, and those sorts of things. There's overall, as you're probably aware from Karen and her presentations, it's all because of all the infrastructure that has been built out there over the years. It's a very engineered system, even though a lot of it looks very natural right now in terms of the flow and the flood basin and salt water and the fresh water and using it for treatment. It's definitely it's not a natural system.
Yeah. And what about the ITT property? We have this big area of marsh that's just kind of been neglected, and to do it right would probably be very, very expensive. Are there some ways that we could use that and improve that without breaking the bank?
So as you probably are aware of too, there are some areas of the ITT property that kind of flood at times. There's definitely salt marsh out there in areas that's beyond the channel. And also with some of the infrastructure that has been taken out associated with the buildings. I think there's some opportunities there. We're also looking at, like I said, connecting up that little Playa Lake over there as well. We've been discussing those options that Karen is interested in, expanding the Wenzel wetlands over time, making that bigger out there. There's definitely opportunity for invasive control as well. Some of it is very weedy. So yes, I think that one has more potential for kind of natural sites than maybe Bixby, though we're definitely exploring what we can for Bixby as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for all of your efforts on this comprehensive project. It's very detailed, and And this is a cherished resource for the community, and so it is well appreciated. I do look forward to seeing your recommendations to balance recreation and art enhancement within the natural environment while maintaining the priorities of the natural environment. I echo Ann's concerns about cost. We have a lot of projects now that are underfunded, and we kind of hate to see this one just kind of fall onto the stack of unfunded projects. So there's lots of great things we want to do, and we need to figure out how to take action and make some things happen. I do echo Jeff's concerns as well in terms of the sensitivity of the art enhancements within the natural environment. One question I have is, are there any trail enhancement or additions that you're looking to recommend? And one thing that I appreciate is when walking a loop around the Baylands area, like starting at where the bike bridge underpass comes from 101, and then walking out into the Baylands and walking along, the walk back is along the Bayshore Boulevard. It's the least natural part of the walk, and if there were some way to be able to have more of that loop walk be off of the highway, perhaps walking along the one side of the road of in the Renzel Pond area that's being redeveloped right now, that would be an improvement. I do appreciate that we want to limit access sensitively to maintain the natural environment, but if there were some way to improve that part of the loop, that would be an appreciated enhancement.
Yeah, so we are looking at the kind of the backside at those businesses that are along Bayshore, not Bayshore, the Embarcadero. You know, you can go along Bayshore, and then you kind of have to go up the it's called Embarcadero, right? Sorry. There's all those businesses on the right side of Embarcadero, and then against the backside of their parking lots, there's sort of a narrow strip of kind of natural or restored or enhanced outdoor space for some of those businesses, and we are looking at the potential to put a trail connection through there, so you would have a more natural, you know, connection back up to kind of the backside of Bixby, basically. We're also exploring as one of those options for the ITT property to have a connector, like if you put a trail through the ITT somewhere, to have one that would cross the saltwater channel and go up into Bixby Park. That is controversial. Not all the stakeholders are supportive of that, but we're exploring that as one of the scenarios. And there are some constraints associated with that because of the salt marsh being a wetland and the salt marsh providing habitat for salt marsh harvest mouse and all of that. But we are looking at that as one option and how that could be done in the least impactful way.
That's great. That analysis of the options and the pros and cons will be much appreciated.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say concerns about, or maybe it was Shawnee, about landscape architecture and all of those. So our landscape architects working on this, they're both restoration ecologists as well, so they're kind of more on the restoration side. They've done a lot of work on levees and open space and that balance. So you need not worry that we're creating a hardened surface sort of urban landscape design for your Bayshore Park here.
Thank you.
This is a question for Kristen. That we have had 3 people on the commission who are on the Baylands Comprehensive Plan Subcommittee, and I think that it would be good to get more regular updates than in this forum, because I think a number of the questions that have been asked here could have been answered or discussed outside of the meeting ahead of time. And so I'm a little bit worried that that subcommittee is not being utilized to the fullest that it could. And we've only got 6 months left on this 18-month project, and already we're talking about final drafts. And I would like to see some drafts before then, privately, or in that subcommittee. So if that's possible, can we get that to happen?
I can certainly pass that message on to Darren when he comes back. I know it's, and I appreciate that we do have an ad hoc, so we should be utilizing them. We would still want to hear from all the commissioners, and it may
Yes.
be the same questions that the ad hoc has, so, but I'll pass that on to Darren.
Yes, I've been on this commission for 3 years, and I've been on a number of subcommittees for other subjects, and we've had a lot more behind-the-scenes discussions than has been afforded for this particular project. So that's why I brought it up.
Sure, and I just wanted to add to that, a lot of the information that we're collecting and that is, I know that they're using is coming from the stakeholder group and from, the users of the Baylands. So, there are some projects that, like the dog parks, where the ad hocs will be more involved, but then for projects that, there's a lot of data being collected and a lot of community involvement, the ad hocs may be less involved, but I'll certainly pass that along to Darren.
Okay. The two examples that I want to bring up specifically that have already been brought up here is the artist walk. We were not aware of that artist walk, and so it would have been nice for some of us to be on that walk. And then the second thing is, going back to what Commissioner Reckdahl said about the, what does this park, what is the potential, the natural potential for this Bixby Park? I would look towards Coyote Hills, San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge on the other side of the Dumbarton Bridge. They have pretty pristine environments, unlike our dump, which is covered with dirt, and the weeds just land there. So if we could replicate Coyote Hills or the Bay Wildlife Refuge, and those places not only have hills that are natural, but also they have freshwater marsh, and they have brackish water marsh, and they have the connection to the creek. I can't remember which creek it is, but it's a huge creek, like our San Francisquito Creek. So they've got all the features that we have. And so if we could just replicate that, that would be fantastic. So I would love a tour with your group to those places so we could point them out. I think either one of those places or both would be a wonderful model. That's all.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's a good, great suggestion, and we can definitely look into that. And then on the point of having concerns about how far along we are and not having seen any part of it, so maybe I didn't make that very clear, but all those chapters that we've been delivering, the existing conditions and the draft vision, goals and objectives, and future projects, they're all chapters of the BCCP, so they have been, as we've completed them, they have been shared for interim review with the stakeholder committee, and people have the opportunity to comment on those. So what you'll see when it's all put together won't be entirely new. Those chapters have all been shared, and as we complete additional draft chapters, they will also be shared.
Well, I'd also like to make some comments, and my first comment would be to thank you for your work and effort. In your presentation, you talked about the fact that at I think the second meeting, you had developed some themes for the third meeting. As you know, I was at all those meetings, and to answer Commissioner Reckdahl's question about was there a general theme, I think the general theme was we don't want balance. And I think that that's really important to remember as we start saying, well, we want balance between recreation and nature and whatever else. The theme of those meetings was no balance. This is a situation where we want total imbalance. We want everything to go towards nature. But then I'll go back saying, well, that's very nice. But the same thing I told to or commented to Kieran, The challenge is there is no nature there. There's a landfill and a bunch of baylands that's been re-engineered. And so it's really hard to create nature out of that.
Right.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't try and do it, but it's a double effort that I think we have to make. And the only way we can make that effort is to remember we don't want balance. we want that imbalance. I obviously need to ask, and so what's the status of the CEQA?
There is no secret currently. It's a plan. I mean, so as the Baylands BCCP will have recommendations, and it'll have, in the action plan, ideas for future projects. So as they would move forward, they would have to go through CEQA.
Right.
And in our best management practices, we will definitely have some call out saying, before implementing any of these, here's what you have to consider, here's what you need to implement before you move forward with any project. But as such, it's really a plan. It's not an action per se.
Right, but at some point, CEQA's got to be part of it, and even if that was sort of anticipated, even if it wasn't specific, it was anticipated on your calendar, it would be a good reminder of the discussions that we've had earlier tonight, particularly if it's now a policy.
Chair, Chair, I'd like to add on to that. So just like we did for the Parks Master Plan, we will be doing a high-level programmatic CEQA document. It's not part of their scope because we wanted all of the funds to go towards development of the plan, so there'll be a separate CEQA process that's done. Just like the master plan, it's high-level, so it's programmatic.
Right.
Any future things that are more detailed, like, I don't know, whatever sort of, any projects that we would do that require CEQA would then have a separate CEQA document under that.
Thank you. I think the only other thing I want to mention here, the habitat islands that are on Bixby were mentioned, and I agree with Commissioner Rectal that it's not a natural environment, but they have constructed these habitat islands. And when Darren was here the last meeting and he was talking about what was happening with Bixby, his point was, it's nice that we put in those habitat islands, but there's a heck of a lot more space up there that is full of invasive plants, and it won't take long for the invasive plants to eat up the habitat islands. So I met with Darren and the rangers to discuss that, and I proposed that it would be an interesting idea to not try and get one organization, environmental volunteers or Audubon or Actera or whatever, to take over the whole place to maintain them. It would be interesting to actually allocate an island to a different group. You could allocate an island to Audubon and one to environmental volunteers and one to the local Audi dealership and whatever. There was a fair amount of skepticism, and then in fact, I can tell you that at this point, the rangers have already arranged for all of the gloves that would be necessary, all the bags that would be necessary, and all the pickup of everything that would be necessary, and they've embraced this idea. And my point would be to invite my fellow commissioners to contact me whether they would like to have the commission as a whole adopt one of the islands. Nobody needs to talk about that now. You can just send me a note later. But I think it would be a good idea for us to go ahead and adopt an island and do what Darren was talking about, which is do what we can to protect those islands and help them grow, as opposed to watch them shrink, with nothing happening. With that, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your presentation and discussion and the effort tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a familiar face in the room. who hasn't been here a while. Peter Jensen, landscape architect with our Public Works Department, will be providing an update on Bulware Park.
Go farther to the, this way? Yep. Yep, go to couple more over. There you go. Got it. This one? Yep.
Bring in F5.
Good evening, Commission. Peter Jensen, landscape architect, City of Palo Alto, here to present Bulware Park. It's our most recent park renovation project that we have right now. Just kind of want to walk you through what has been proposed for the renovation elements, discuss a little bit about the community meeting that we had and what came from that, and then give you a rundown of kind of the schedule of the project to date. This is an aerial view of Bulware Park, very close to the Fry's location there. Has, I think, some potential to be incorporated into that overall design later in the future, but for our purposes now, we have a capital improvement project with a construction budget of $475,000. The renovations mostly look at the playgrounds themselves and replacing the play equipment that was there. The last time that the playgrounds were renovated was in 1993. We usually change out that equipment 15 to 20 year time span, so it's definitely getting time to do that.
What was the year that was put in?
93.
93.
Along with the renovation of the playground, does take up a majority of the budget that we're going to use. Not only do we have to do the equipment, but we also have to bring it up to ADA standards, which the playgrounds do not meet now. If you have seen the playgrounds or not, they are very large sand play box areas with equipment that float out in the middle. Not much access to the equipment from the sides. In fact, one of the playgrounds itself has an elevated step lip around it that really doesn't allow any type of access at all to it. So we'll have to work on those ADA limitations, as well as a few others that are in the park. Plus, we want to look at then to the irrigation and planting that's out there and make sure that it's brought up to date and working efficiently. As well as the site furnishing that is out there now, the benches, the tables, the barbecues, the trash receptacles, all of them are definitely a little antiquated at this point and old, and they need to be replaced. I would like to look at a little turf reduction there. I think that will probably be a bid alternate item, but there are locations in the park that do have some small areas of turf that are not used that could be converted and made more natural or made to be more native planting areas. And then I address some of the ADA improvements that have to be made for the playground, but also within the park itself, there are no direct crosswalks or ramps that meet ADA standards that actually get you to the park. If you're across the street from it, that need to be addressed. There is one ADA parking stall on the street that has some slope difficulties that need to be addressed to make that properly ADA. And some of the walkways around the park itself don't meet ADA standards due to their cross slopes being greater than 2% that need to be addressed. The graphic that you're looking at now is showing the proposed renovations to the park. Again, the tot lots and the playground. The tot lot is number 1 up here. Is my mouse working? Yes. And then the larger children's playground. Because of their size, and they are fairly significant as far as playgrounds go, and the limited budget that we have, we did start to look at maybe combining the playgrounds into one location, but to demo out one of the playgrounds themselves and to put back something new there, it was basically the entire budget that couldn't really address anything else. So we're going to maintain the playgrounds themselves, and actually we're going to employ a tactic that we did at Bowden Park and at the Ventura Community Center, where we're going to utilize the existing poles that the play equipment now has, repaint them, and then put new equipment onto the poles, which does save quite a significant amount of money. Just in the demolition itself, I was looking at the construction drawings the other day, and the footings for some of the playground equipment is quite significant and would be a chore to get it out of there. So I think economically it behooves us to use what we have out there, and the community does like the play equipment and how it's set up now, so they were supportive of that. Irrigation improvements in the main central turf area, just reconfiguring and changing out some of the heads to make that work more efficiently. Landscape improvements. Number 4, there's a very large ivy hedge. I don't think it started out as a hedge, but it's grown to a size where the ivy has become a hedge that needs to be addressed along that edge. That's also another area for the changing the planting to more native planting in those areas. And then you'll see the number 4 on this side right here is an unused turf space that could definitely be renovated to more of a native landscape area. Number 5 are the curb cuts and crosswalks. We're going to propose actually to do 2 curb cuts right here and get a direct crosswalk across the street at that point there, as well as down in this location here. There is one crosswalk that does now currently get you into the park from this side of the road. Unfortunately, it's using someone's driveway apron as the ramp, which it can't really do that. So we're eventually going to abandon that crosswalk and build a new one at that point. Site furnishing throughout the park, as I said, the picnic tables, barbecues, trash receptacles, drinking fountain, all those need to be changed out. Accessible walk. Currently now, the asphalt walkway along the rear portion of the park dead ends into the basketball court here. Unfortunately, there's a good amount of that doesn't meet ADA standards. Instead of actually removing that entire walkway and redoing it again, what we're proposing to do is where the number 7 is at in this location, actually connect the walkway over to the existing walk and to maintain then an ADA accessible loop within the park itself. You will be able to do what you're doing now and walk this way and access the basketball courts and walk on the basketball courts that meet this walk here. But now it will make a little bit more sense with just walking around. Currently, the pathways just end into the basketball court, so you kind of have to use the basketball court as the path, and if someone's playing out there, it's a little awkward in its connection. So by making that one little connection there, we address some of our ADA needs, as well as, I think, making the flow and the connection of the amenities in the park better than what they are now. There is and this is something that came up in the community meeting and also with staff, a picnic table that exists back here in the corner, right here. It is not totally visible from the street there and has had incidents in the past of people using it or sleeping there. People have also been using it to jump over the fence to use the creek as a walkway. So we would like to eliminate that picnic table from there and actually move it into where the picnic tables are now, which are around these number 6s, and just make a 3-table picnic area joined together instead of having one floating off. I think we talked about the accessible parking stall needs to be regraded. All the paving in the park itself is asphalt, so we will be refinishing the asphalt surfacing to basically clean that up and remove the cracking that has occurred over time, which happens to asphalt. These are some images of the playground equipment. So in Palo Alto, we use a lot of Ross Recreation. They supply us our equipment. In situations like this, they actually had the original plans back from 1993, so I could use that information, and it was very easy for them to start to reclad the poles in new items. It is very similar to what is out there now. That was kind of the request of the community to have. I think we've toned down some of the color there. In this rendering, I would say that I would still like to get rid of some of the oranges and the blues and make it a little bit more natural, but this is what was put together by Ross, so we'll work on that more. When we went to the community the first time, we didn't specifically talk about each piece of equipment, but that will definitely be a conversation more that they did want to get into at the next meeting. This is the tot lot equipment, the proposed replacements on that. And then any questions or comments from the commission?
Does anybody have any questions? Jeff?
Yeah, just very quickly, I was out there the other day, actually. It was on a weekday morning, and I saw maybe 3 or 4 separate seniors walking the loop and cutting through the basketball court, as you mentioned. But one question, and I know we're really tight on money and so forth, but as we move forward with some of these projects and we look at different playgrounds for the youth and tot lots and so forth, what is out there for seniors, or is it only a walking path and a bench, or are there other elements to parks that we can incorporate, especially when we've talked about with the master plan, the aging population and so forth? And I don't know, I'm not an expert myself, but just wondering, are there other elements within a park or things that you can add besides a nice walking path and a bench that could potentially be appealing?
Well, there is the option, which they've had for a while, but like anything else, gets better as time goes along, the adult fitness equipment. I can't say it's built for someone that really wants to be a weight lifter, but especially for older adults, it does gear itself towards that kind of user group. So we could look at adding some of that equipment in the areas. Like I said, the play areas are quite large, so there is maybe some possibility of incorporating that stuff in there. From the master plan too, we also discussed just having open rubberized surface areas that you could do low impact physical activity on, whether that be yoga or some type of stretching activity. So that's another possibility to do. I think, again, providing the walking path is always good. Providing seating that's inviting and under the shade are kind of key features there as well. So there are some things that I think we can address.
And then very quickly, was the meeting well attended, the community meeting? It seems like a fairly dense area, is that correct?
Yes. The Ventura community, not a large overall space, but definitely is one of the most densely populated as far as the housing goes there, mostly apartments there. We did have 10 people that came to the meeting. Most of them were young families there. They did provide good feedback on the plan itself and what they wanted to see there. Now, of course, it's 10 people in an area where a lot of people. So I think we did the best at capturing, I think, what the community wanted there. So.
Okay. Thank you so much for all your work. This is, it's great to see something like this move forward.
Yeah, totally agree. It's great, and thanks for doing that. I'm glad to see the community meetings still on the schedule. And how did you publicize them?
We do it in a couple ways. I think the most successful is through the mailer that we do. Technically, we're only supposed to do within like 600 feet or 1,000 feet. I don't know what that is, but we always do a lot bigger. So we actually captured the entire Ventura community area. I think we mailed out 1,500 to 1,800 postcards to residents there. It was signed within the park itself for a few weeks about the meeting. It is pushed out on all the city's social media platforms, so Twitter, Facebook, those things. And then there was a ad in the newspaper that ran the 2 Fridays before the meeting. So it's we try our best, and we try to use all the avenues that we can. I did, and for most of these meetings now, I usually do ask at the beginning of the meeting how people heard about it, because that is interesting to me. And it was mostly the postcard. I think someone saw it on Facebook, a few people saw the signs in the park, and then most people just got the postcard for it. So.
Does it make any sense to do anything through our summer camps and also through the school district, or is that not possible?
I think through the school district, definitely. I mean, just for those entities, they have mailing lists that definitely can help out. So, of course, any avenue of pushing out information is always is good.
Yeah.
So,
And just maybe the PTA council as well, so.
I would actually just quickly make one comment on that. I know there's a website Nextdoor, and I see sometimes planning and transportation meetings, for example, on that, and I think that's becoming more and more popular to use. So whether it's for our own, Parks and Recreation Commission to shoot something out on that, or other
I'd have
avenues.
to confirm, but I do believe that we do push information on that platform as well, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Peter, first off, kudos again on the dog park.
Oh, yeah, me
thank you.
too. I wanted to say that.
I'm sorry I wasn't there for the opening of it. I would have liked to see that. But
It was a great crowd. And it seems like it's been well received and well used.
yes, it's been well used before the fence was put up. So,
So from the first community meeting, I know that it's a small sample size, but was there any consensus on improvements, or is it just we want you to update the playground equipment?
yeah, I think that the majority of the conversation centered around the playgrounds and making sure that the playgrounds were going to stay there, or the size was going to stay the same, and that the equipment was going to be fairly the same that it is now. So there was, we're not proposing a lot of change to the park itself. So I think everyone was comfortable and understood kind of the aspects of the renovation and the things that needed to be addressed. So.
Yeah, something I know that you take into consideration all the time, and I think that we talk about it sometimes up here as well, is diversity of amenities within parks, and I think that the Tot Playground at Boulware Park is a great example of that, where you have, a park that has a specific type of amenity that would, be good for young families. In terms of the adult fitness equipment, Darren had raised that, I think just as a general matter, maybe 1 or 2 meetings past about, thinking about where we might integrate additional adult fitness equipment. I think that would be a great idea. So if there's an opportunity and if you have some money available, you might take a look at places within Boulware where that would be added. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I use this park, or my kids use this park quite a bit. It was within strollering radius, so we would make the trip over there quite a bit. And even back then, it was bad condition, so I'm glad to see that we're repairing things. That back corner is just problematic. It's kind of tucked away there, and so we're taking picnic table out, and what are we going to do back there? Just have grass, or?
I think we're going to leave it like it is now. It's basically a mulched area. just because of the incidents that have occurred there before and the lack of view back into that corner, it's probably the best to leave it open as much as possible. One thing that was brought up in the meeting that that actually didn't make it to the presentation was the community did request better fencing back in that corner because of the
Against the creek, or?
yeah, against the creek, and there's one house that backs up back there as well that people have come into the backyard before. So enhancing the fencing back there, probably using like the Caltrain style of fencing that we just put up along the line. It architecturally looks better than chain link does, but it's very difficult to get over and climb, almost impossible. That might help that area back there too, because it could close that down as an access point. What I heard mostly is that people are using the creek as like a hidden pathway, basically, to move around back there. So the community was definitely concerned, and they would like to limit that as much as possible. And the part that they're identifying is that back corner as far as them accessing that. So I think we will probably address that with some upgrades of the fence. But putting anything else back there, I'm not quite sure. Maybe like a horseshoe or a bocce court. Again, something that I think provides a lot of visibility, but could provide another amenity back there.
Yeah,
so
it's hard because you don't want to have something that's going to attract a nuisance, but also you don't want it to be unused. It's
right.
tough.
No, it is a tough one, and it is extremely close to the house that's back there too. So it's hard to put, the basketball court's there. So it's hard to just squeeze something else back in there that is just going to be very close to someone's house as well. So unfortunately, at this time, I think with the budget that we have, it's going to stay and it's going to stay open. But again, I think that looking at that Fry's development, I think some way of linking that development over to the park and then recreating that edge along there would be interesting to look at. But that's just me.
Yeah, if you could have like a bridge. I mean, that back corner could be used as a bridge access. That would not be a bad idea.
Or restoring the creek.
Yeah, during the master plan, we mentioned that. And
Kristen's like, stop.
If we had the money to do that, is that still of interest to us, or to restore the creek at that point and provide access, or would we not want to do that?
I think that we would want to do that. I think it's always best to restore the creek where possible. I know the county had visions of doing that and was trying to locate funding to set up a grant to do that, just because of the cost of doing something like that is not small. When they started to do that a few years ago, we did start to talk about the area in Mitchell Park around the Adobe Creek Bridge and restoring the Adobe Creek in Mitchell Park to what it was before. And they seemed open to that. But I think that they haven't figured out their funding for their grant yet. So we were waiting on that. It's going to take something like that, though, to make that happen, I think. Or, a development that's large enough that could start to fund something like that.
And do you think the neighbors would be receptive to that, or they think?
Again, it's mostly about design. No, they wouldn't if it was an overgrown place for people to hide out and camp down there. But I think that if it was developed with more of an idea that it is natural, but open and accessible, I think that's definitely a possibility to do.
Yeah, my kids love Shoe Park up in Los Altos. We spend a lot of time in the stream up there. And so if that wasn't in local, that'd be very nice.
Yes. No, even when we started to talk about the Mitchell Park Adobe Creek segment in there, some people in Public Works that had grown up here talked about that as like the favorite thing that they played in was down on that creek. So it would be nice to get those areas back in there for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for your efforts on this. It's great to see us working to enhance our parks. You mentioned the cycle that the parks are typically refurbished. Did you say 15 to 20 years?
For play equipment, yes,
for
which
play-
kind of does dictate our renovation schedule. It's set up that it's, because of the playgrounds, and they usually are a larger part of the budget of the project, we usually renovate a park every 15 or 20 years, mostly looking at the playground, but then also the other things that are in it.
But yeah, my sense is it seems to run more than 20 years.
That's just, all then starts to depend on the budget and working the projects in there. Yes, I would agree with you. We do start to, at the 15-year mark, try to get the projects on the books as quickly as we can. Sometimes that takes longer than other times, but.
And do you know which parks are up next?
I know that Bowl Park is on the list. There are a few. Over the next few years, there's, I think, 5 or 6 parks that are going to go through the same renovation style of it. I don't recall offhand what they are, but they are in the capital budget set up already for it, so.
And did you mention the sand is going away and that'll be replaced with?
That's something I think we'll talk about more with the community. I'm sure that there is a desire to keep some of the sand. So we probably will keep some of the sand in the tot lot area. The way that it's set up now, the front half of it is where all the equipment is, and the back half is more of a sand play area, and I think we'll keep that the way that it is, but probably the sand in the big kids area will go away.
Okay, so we, as a general policy, we are continuing to keep sand in some cases.
In a more limited factor, yes, but I don't think we don't have a policy of eliminating it altogether. It does seem, just from experience in community meetings, that the community does like it and want to try to maintain it as much as possible. So yes.
Great, and I certainly support the idea of removing turf and converting to native plants where appropriate. I'm wondering if the back corner where the table's getting removed would be appropriate to add some nature back in there.
Perhaps some trees, just so to keep the ground plane more clear, but it's a possibility. Planting some small oak trees back there, letting them grow. It is a good space for it.
Right.
It's sad that that we can't develop it just because the land and the value of it is.
And just one more comment, and there's probably nothing really to do to act on this, but there's certainly been a lot of discussion about the desire to add the AT&T property to Bulwer Park, and I'm wondering if you knew that property was going to be added in the next 5 to 10 or 20 years, which is the cycle for the refurb, is there anything that you would do differently? And that you might want to consider?
I mean, that's, really based upon budget itself. I mean, of course, if you had unlimited, I would probably start from scratch and relay it all out again like we did for Scott Park. It was just so small that you could do it with the budget that we had. I think there would be a longer conversation about the road that's there and if it stays or goes away to make the connection of the space. Again, I think there is a prime opportunity in the development of the Fry's location to make that connection all the way across. Mm-hmm. So there's possible funding that could happen there. I don't know. I haven't really thought about the design going over there yet, so I can't say if there's anything I'd do differently. Most likely it would be a larger, more active turf space that would start to extend itself over there with probably more native planting around the outside and the edging, if we could eliminate the road, because it's not overly used. That is a point of concern for the community, because I know that the road has been used for parking, long-term parking for people that live in their cars. That, is a concern for some of the people, the community there. That could help be addressed if the road went away. But for this project, that's just not possible.
Okay, thank you.
Well, most of my comments have been covered, but I'd like to make comment about each of those comments. First of all, it's absolutely essential that whatever you do on the side that's not AT&T property should be something that even if you did, when you did, not if, but when you add AT&T, that you don't have to redo a lot of what you're doing here. So if you want to add more turf, if you want to add more native areas, that's great, as long as you don't mess with what you're doing now. So it looks like the road, it's pretty self-contained, the stuff on the left side of the road. So I think you're doing a great job, and just, I want to make sure that you don't do too much that's going to go away if you added AT&T.
No, I think that looking at in the long run, that was a consideration, was the idea that the AT&T park could be developed, and we would not want to build anything that was, a bathroom or something like that along the edge over there that would have to be then torn down to
Exactly.
reconfigure it again. So, that area is just maintained is the way it is.
And I had the exact same suggestion that Commissioner Reckdahl had about making a bridge over from the Fry's property to that back corner. That seems like a perfect place for a bridge, very similar to the bridge over to Magical Playground in Mitchell Park. And I noticed that and that gives you access to the creek. You get to look at it and everything like that. It's very nice. And you get access to a tie-in to Fry's. So I think that is terrific. One other comment, and that is that when you had that stakeholder meeting, I wanted to make sure that the ad hoc committee for parks and amenities is specifically invited, those people, and it's Macaulay and Cribbs, and Commissioner Reckdahl is on the Ventura coordinated area. He should have been invited specifically for that. Maybe he was. And for any future park redos, that park amenities ad hoc committee should be invited specifically by name. And then as far as, and then I really like the idea of doing whatever you can do for Adobe Creek in Mitchell Park, you could do for this creek here, some kind of an interface with the creek, even if it's a hill overlooking the creek, and maybe not access to the creek, but a hill overlooking it, then, something like that, some nice transition would be great if we can do it. And then my last comment is, I'm assuming that with the turf reduction and irrigation changes, you're going to try to use some of that purple pipe water that's going to the Stanford Industrial Park.
If that was a possibility to do, yes. If we could get the water over there, then definitely we would want to do it. Yeah. Our city policy is for renovations of parks that we do install the recycled water products that are purple, just in case that comes along faster than than what is being planned currently. But yes, I think one day, I don't know when that will be, but probably all the parks will operate off the recycled water.
Okay. That's all I had. Thanks.
Peter, so the first thing I'd like to do is repeat the dog park thing. That was an exciting event. It was well attended. It was well done. You talked about repairing asphalt. Is there any consideration to any of those places where we would take out asphalt and put in, gravel or something that was more permeable? Or
it's just about cost. The asphalt out there is not in bad shape. It just, over time it cracks because of its material itself. Yeah. So it's pretty easily fixed. Okay. But yeah, no, nothing has been considered now to replace it with another material. It is I would consider it semi-permeable because it does sheet flow off to landscape area, not
Yeah.
just the street.
Right,
So at least it has that going for it.
that argument. You mentioned cost. I think I heard you say there was something like 400 and some $1,000 were involved. And as you went through it, and I'm certainly not against doing things that are ADA, but it sounded to me like an awful lot of the effort is to be ADA compliant. And I was wondering, I'm not objecting to that, but is there, since funding's an issue, is there anything we've ever considered, or is there any opportunities to get ADA funding for any of these projects in our parks?
This park in particular was, I think the budget was set before we had our city evaluated ADA review. I actually have now a little book that talks about every park and every little area in every park that needs to be addressed. When we start to put the budget together now for future projects, we will definitely be adding a sum of money to address those issues in the park. That'll be part of the renovation, so we can cover those. There has not been a conversation yet, I do not believe, there could have been, not that I'm aware of, about just setting up a separate stream of annual funding to address
I was thinking more of, is there federal funding or something that could be?
No, and there's nothing now. It's basically, it's on us to address the
Okay.
shortfalls in the park, so.
In terms of the stakeholder and outreach meetings, I would like to echo what Commissioner Moss said in terms of inviting. And I would go so far as I don't think there'd be any Brown Act violations if the whole committee was invited, as long as we're not having specific meetings there. But if more than the ad hoc showed up to hear what the people were saying, I think that would be good and not bad. I've done that in some of the Cumberly Park stuff, and it's always interesting. And I'm sort of interested at some point, Keith, I think you're our representative to the Ventura Park project or whatever. So maybe coming back, and I don't know how much progress has been made, but the tie-in to here, I think would be interesting to hear about.
Well, there's a green space there, so I think capitalizing on what we have already and building off it would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Ventura's first meeting was supposed to be about a month ago, and they've delayed it, and it's about a month from now. They'll be having the first meeting, and so they're still starting.
Right.
For this project, and for some in this, I guess, price range that we're in, to stretch the dollars as much as we can, the design and the construction drawings are all done in-house by myself and by staff. So we do save, I think if you look at the capital improvement budget book, there's $450,000 for improvements and another $45,000 for design. So we're basically going to take that $45,000 and move it over to the improvement part. So we do try to stretch as much as possible, especially in the market that we are in now, which is is bidding very high. But I think that everything that we've proposed, we can definitely do with the budget that we have. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, we can let Peter go.
I just have one.
Sure, Ann. Sorry, I missed that.
Are there AEDs in all of our parks? Do you know? Defibrillators?
I do not believe so. I believe
In some of the bigger ones, but not the
in
smaller?
our regional parks. So Mitchell Park, Rinconada Park, and Greer Park have them by the restroom facilities or the little buildings, but I do not believe that any of the other parks do have them. So.
It might be interesting to kind of think how we could do that, because there are some programs around that, yeah. And then on this project schedule, I was just confused because I think that maybe you meant to say 2019 for the second meeting and the third meeting and the adoption, right in the middle, or no?
Oh, yes, it should say 19, not 18 there, you're right. So the Parks and Recs Commission meeting in January would be January 2019, and then the PRC meeting for the park improvement adoption would be in 19 as well, February of 19.
I just thought I was going backwards. I thought, this doesn't
No,
make
that's
sense.
just my mistake on the dates.
And then one final comment. Since we
nice
have,
catch.
I know, I apologize. Since we have these neighborhood
Do you
meetings.
guys remember that meeting?
I didn't remember that meeting. Since we have these park improvements going on, and we're starting to you're meeting with all the potential stakeholders, and people are giving their impressions and everything, is now the time to start thinking about like friends of the parks, not in the foundation way, but people who live close to the park, to kind of formalize in a really nice way about taking good care of the park once it gets reinstalled and celebrated. I think we've talked about that in the past, but maybe never really did it. And I don't know that it's a staff thing. It's just something that might organically spring up about, hey, we have a new park and let's see what we can do to take care of it. Just a thought.
No, I think it's a good thought, actually, and I know that there's an ad hoc group, I think that's associated with the Friends of the Parks now. I think we should have further conversations, offline about, with staff and the ad hoc about maybe better ways that that group can be used to help us, preserve the parks, fund the parks, all those kind of fun things. So.
Well, it might be fun to try with this particular one when it gets done.
Right.
So.
No, I think, I know that they've expressed some want to, I don't know, limitedly financially help, fund maybe some of the picnic tables or the amenities, something like that. That would be definitely low-hanging fruit that I think that they could help with in the short term. But I do think that that group has a potential that it could impact the park system in a large way over a period of time.
So some things are more fun to fund than other things. And so when we had that itemized sheet from the dog park, there were some things that looked like they were opportunities for people to fund. And so maybe if we could look at a park and say, okay, of this 459,000, what are some things, or what might,
Well, I mean, besides benches and tables, I think probably a much more exciting item for people to donate to is maybe some of the play equipment. So I think, it's mostly about kind of marketing and looking about what people are excited about, so.
And I wanted to add also that in the Parks Master Plan, there is a program or policy, I guess it's a program that talks about establishing a community neighborhood groups that actually participate in cleanup and maintenance of parks. So you have a neighborhood park maintenance day, and neighbors can come out and actually help do the work that staff would do, which gives them a real sense of ownership of the park and would make them want to take care of it a little bit more. Not that people aren't, but it just, and people's eyes are probably on it a little bit more, like, hey, I helped do that, so now I want to watch to make sure it's okay, So that's something I have mentioned, Darren and I have talked about it a little bit and how we can get that going, so I'd like to explore that a little bit more.
I've also found too that using our other local nonprofits, especially Canopy, is beneficial. It doesn't have to be totally associated with the project itself, but at the end of the project, it would be nice to maybe do a tree planting out there. Again, it just involves the local community to be more in touch with the park itself, when they can look out at the park and say, I planted that tree, and you can watch it grow for, a long time. That it definitely has a positive impact on the park itself.
And as a quick update that would really go into the next section of ad hoc committee or liaison updates, we have had recent meetings with Friends of the Palo Alto Parks. on various conversations. I will be meeting with them again on next Thursday, taking them out into the fields so that they can get a better view of what the opportunities are. Peter, I know you mentioned at one point we should work on developing the relationship, and with Kristen's support, we're working hard at that, I think.
One comment along those lines, and that is just like we told the Friends of the Palo Alto Parks about the dog park, I think that in community meeting 2 and community meeting 3, if at one of those 2 meetings, they could be there with a table and a little card or envelope that says if you want to contribute towards some of the amenities for this park, and we should make that a regular feature of a community meeting for a particular park, for a particular community, because that's the best way to get the community together, I mean, to be part of it.
Thank you.
With that, are there any other ad hoc committee or liaison updates? I don't have the chart in front of me, but
I have one question for Peter while he's here.
Okay.
You did a nice job a couple years ago leading that Bull Park planting alongside the path. Some of those plants have died, obviously. We had some mortality, but overall they're doing well. Is there any plan to go back and replant the ones that have died?
Actually, we replanted in the fall. I think we planted 8 or 9 plants out there. I did look at it the other day. There is some other plants that have died out there, but actually we're doing pretty good for the plants. So we are planning on installing the plants again this fall. This is actually, though, the last year that we'll be replacing the plants out there. Okay. The VA did just, in the last few weeks, has started their planting along that wall.
So when they take the fence down, there'll be some extra space between their wall and the park. Are they going to put stuff in where that fence is right now, the construction fence?
I'd have to look at this again, but I believe what they did is they put the fence back up, and so there's a little alleyway that's in there between a fence and their wall that they planted in.
Oh, they planted between there.
So they put the fence back, basically.
Okay.
That's there. But they did plant I think their original plan was to plant all redwood trees along there. And we had a conversation with them about planting native oak trees back there, so they did change their plant palette.
And we didn't want redwood.
Not the easiest.
We didn't want redwood because
the redwoods, well, it's just not.
It wouldn't do well in that area.
No, and it's, I think that when you walk through that area, it is mostly an oak woodland.
Yeah.
It does have a lot of oak trees, especially coast live oak along there. So we wanted to maintain that.
In Bull Park, though, there's some redwoods along the creek there.
Yes.
But places like Strode Park that have redwood grove, all those redwoods are dying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the redwood requires irrigation.
Yeah. Serious irrigation.
Yes. I would say, I don't know if we've ever talked about this before. I'll take a couple seconds though, but the El Palo Alto, I think, lives in a unique micro environment where it was next to the stream and had access to water and was able to grow to be a ginormous tree. I think the specialty around it was that it was the only one. Everything else was oak trees that grew around it, so it stood out even more. Of course, over the time, it is a very easy tree to propagate and to grow, and we have grown a massive redwood forest on the lowlands here. But if you take the irrigation away, they only live for 5 or 6 years until they really start to decline or just die. And you can even see that in the Magical Forest in Rinconada Park, where there's not a direct supplemental irrigation system. The guys actually have to take out hoses and use old school rainbird irrigation to water them, to maintain them. That didn't happen though for a while, so you can see that they definitely quickly decline.
The thing is that the hydraulics in those trees will only move water up 60 feet.
Right.
And the reason they can live on the coast is they get the water from the mist above 60 feet, but
Yes.
otherwise they just die off.
Yes, the majority of the water intake by a redwood, unlike other trees, almost no other tree does this, but it absorbs quite a bit of water through its leaf, mostly through fog. So if you don't have the fog, then it's a problem for it. If you look at the redwoods around here, they will max out at all the same height. That's just the height that they can push up to in the drought and the heat that they get here. And in prolonged periods of drought, you'll see that most of them that have had a couple of years of water, that their tops will die. So, and they'll basically almost die all the way back to the exact point that all the other ones are the same height. If you start to look out, it's pretty funny to see, but they're pretty much all the same height. And I think that's just an environmental condition that they just cannot push up anymore because they're just not getting the water into their foliage. But again, for the Bull Park thing, we definitely wanted to make it more native. Eventually, I don't know, irrigation systems, they come and they go. So hopefully, by the time the VA system stops functioning, that those trees will be established enough, and then they'll just live out there without any more maintenance, which would be the kind of the long-term goal of plants like that.
Just one more note. I believe Palo Alto has 3 protected tree species, redwood, coastal live oak, and valley oak. And my understanding is that there's movement that the redwood might not be protected because it's not appropriate for most of the locations here.
That's something that has been discussed, but like with anything, it's more of a political question and how much you want to push on, again, if Palo Alto wasn't called Palo Alto, and if Redwood City wasn't called Redwood City, it would probably be easier to make those changes, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
Let's call it Chicago.
But going forward, if there are...
Hang on, David has light on.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, I'll
Go
wait.
ahead, David.
I'll wait.
Okay.
The only comment I was going to say is going forward, if you have another planting like you did along Bull, please invite the commission, because that was a very good way to spend a morning.
Yes, that was a very successful planting. I think that's the biggest planting I've done with canopy to date. So I think it was over 100 plants, 60 trees and 40 plants. So
I have an update on ad hoc committee, not necessarily for Peter. So,
Peter, please feel free to stay and listen to all our stories, or please feel free to head home.
well, I will actually though take the time, because I am going to go home, but I will take the time to say that and I don't know if Kristen said this before, but the replacement of the bridge in Mitchell Park will start July 9th. And it is going to be a little logistical challenge because the bridge will be closed from July 9th through August. I'm saying August 30th right now. I'm hoping that it's going to be done by the time school starts, which is August 14th. But I'm planning that it will not be done, and we'll have all the routes that we need set up prior to that. That's basically what I'm working on now. But the bridge will be closed July 9th through when the bridge gets put back in. Hopefully that is by the 13th, but it could push into the end of August.
so how will they get to Magical Bridge?
I have a very detailed little plan that shows the access route. It's very difficult to get there.
Can you make
And I
it?
have not got all the agreements from the adjoining parties yet, so I'd rather not say how that's going to happen, but hopefully it's going to go down Middlefield and then get into the playground.
There's no way to create the new one just to the left of the old one and leave the old one up
I mean, the
until...
bridge, no, I mean, I think our idea when we did Magical Bridge that we would do the bridge at the same time. Unfortunately, we had a funding gap there and the bridge stayed. So we did build the pathways on each side to meet the new bridge. So now we've just got to put the new bridge. The actual aspect of installing the bridge is very quick. It's being built right now. It's close to being done. When they bring it out, they'll drop it in with a crane. It'll take about a day to do. It's
okay.
mostly demoing out the old bridge and then building the abutments. The abutments are the thing that will take a few weeks to build, and they have to cure because they're concrete. So that's the aspect of basically the timing and why the bridge is closed, because they basically have to take it all out.
And why did you pick summer instead of, say, the dead of winter? Is it
We just, for the school.
school?
Yeah.
The major access to
It is.
JLS.
Yes. I mean, it's used by hundreds of students in the morning going to all the schools around there, and commuters as well that go through the park. So that is kind of the logistic hurdle there, is to get the detour plans out that people can see that's clearly marked. And we decided to do it July 9th because of the chili cook-off in the park. We didn't really want to shut the bridge down for the 4th of July celebration there. So we did give ourselves a very tight window to do, but when you looked at the full year, that was actually the longest period of time to do the work. So like I said, we'll cross our fingers that we can get done by the time school starts. That's the plan, but we're going to make plans that it won't.
Excuse me, have we notified the pickleball community about this closure?
I just got approval today from my alternative parking plan for them to give to them, so I will be emailing them tomorrow probably about they know about the project, but they don't know the access and the route to get into there. The idea is to keep it open so that the tennis courts and the playground will maintain open. And of course, there is the Charleston walkway that gets you out to Charleston. Just unfortunate, there's just not a lot of parking out there. But that will be one of the direct routes into the space itself. So, and I'm working with also the Friends of the Magical Bridge to get that information up on their website. So when people do come to the playground, that they are able to access it or get to it. So.
What about the back parking lot of Unitarian Church?
I haven't reached out to them yet. They've been doing work in the area that I think that would be the best to do the parking, and they've kind of closed that area down, and there is no ADA ramp that goes from their property. You still have to go out to Charleston and then all the way back down the pathway. There is some street parking that is out on Charleston that we are going to make available and show that there's parking out there. It's tough. It's a tough one, unfortunately.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm going to assume you have no more bad news.
No, that's it.
Two things. I didn't hear earlier in the department report about the golf course opening, but that was a really big deal since our last meeting. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew how incredible that opening was. And we tried to make a reservation for a slot this week, and it's full. So it's getting a lot of great traction, and it's just a great job you guys did. That was what, Memorial Day weekend, right?
Right, it was Memorial Day weekend, and I think Darren is going to be coming either next month or the month after to give just sort of an update on how the course is doing so far. It's great to hear that you couldn't get in, but I hope that you do find a time to get in, because I was able to play the course and it's really fun, and I'm not a golfer, and I had a blast, and it's just so beautiful and nice to be out there. So I hope you do get a chance to go out and golf soon.
Yeah. The second thing is, one of my favorite subjects is connections to open space, to other open space. And so I went to the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space Preserve board meetings for the past couple months, and one of them had a very nice new addition from Saratoga, City of Saratoga, into all of their open spaces there. And so it reminded me how lucky we are to have all the connections that we do to their open space preserves. And On July 1st, I will be walking from Palo Alto to the sea, 39 miles on public trails from Arastradero Preserve through Foothills Park, through Los Troncos Open Space, up to Black Mountain, from there to Portola State Park, from there to Butano, from there to Gazos Creek. And so we should probably publicize that connectivity that we have already got and that other towns like Saratoga are wishing they had. So, and along those lines, there are official trails like the Bay Trail and the Skyline to the Sea Trail and the Bay Ridge Trail that are official Bay Area trails. But one of the things, in order for us to have an official trail like that, it has to be open to not only pedestrians but also bikes. And so I had a conversation with Darren about the connectivity between Arastradero Preserve and Skyline. And the only section that doesn't fit that is Foothills Park and the Los Troncos Open Space Preserve. They've already said that Los Troncos Open Space Preserve, they would open that to bike traffic if we would open up Foothills. There is no way at this particular time that there's no connection from Arastradero. You can walk, the public can walk from Arastradero Preserve through Foothills Park to Los Troncos, but they cannot bike.
Not as a technical matter, they can't.
What?
Not as a technical matter. Foothills Park is not open to the public.
But there is
David, I'm going to suggest that this could be an interesting topic at a future meeting where we could actually spend time discussing it. I think it's a good topic. I think I'd like to make a note and then explore it that way rather than just at the moment. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to bring up or add?
I was just going to ask where David is camping on his trek. Where are you camping? Portola Valley?
Top of Black Mountain, Portola State Park, and Butano.
I thought you were going to maybe ask us to sponsor you for something. I mean, that's a big deal what you're doing. Could I ask one more thing before we go?
Sure.
So I was really intrigued with the whole conversation about the environment and the CEQA and all of that today, and it just occurred to me that I didn't know as much as I should know about it, and so it seemed like if I could answer the question, when does a maintenance project become a construction project? Is it the matter of the amount of area that is affected, or is it the cost? Or is it something else that I don't understand?
When does a boy become a man? You know,
Well,
depends who you ask.
is there an easy answer to that or not?
I'm betting that there's not an easy answer.
Well, I was just,
Although Kristen's about to prove me wrong.
are you asking when does, with respect to CEQA?
In
When does-
general, when does a maintenance project that doesn't need CEQA become a construction project? What's the trigger there? Or is there no trigger? Is it a cost? Is it an acreage?
I think
Is
that
it
the maintenance project is something that was set up as something that was supposed to be done over periods of time. Like, you know, when I think you talk about the Emily Renzel, technically, I think every year they were supposed to be going in there, or that was their maintenance plan that they had to clear it out. They did not do that, so now they had to do it, and it took, it became a bigger project than I think that it became. But that was an established thing that was from their permit that they had to do that. And that's why it became maintenance, because it was operating on a permit that they have. It wasn't a construction project. That construction project then would require a new permit.
That helps.
And that permit then would trigger then the CEQA aspect of it. So, and then the CEQA aspect is looking at, I can't remember them all. There's like 7 or 8 different things that it's looking at. But I think from their purposes and for that particular project, that it was thought of and it was set up on that idea that they already had a permit and an agreement, that was their maintenance, so that's what they did the maintenance on.
But I think if the commission as a whole is interested in understanding CEQA better, and not necessarily for a specific project at a time, but just in general, CEQA law, we could certainly add that to the agenda.
Yes,
So
that would be
we
nice,
have
at least from my
CEQA
perspective. so,
experts, giving.
Agreed.
Thank you.
This isn't an ad hoc item, but it was raised by one of the speakers. I think that it might have been the commission that actually asked not to have unnecessary paper materials at these meetings, and also not to have advance paper printed packets and whatnot delivered. I think it probably does make sense, though, to have a few copies available for the public in case people need them. So maybe there is kind of a hybrid, as Dawn suggested. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that, but if that's possible, that might be the easy route to resolve that question.
Well, I'll just add that I think there was some confusion as to the city clerk's direction. So moving forward, we'll provide paper copies of the staff reports. I think that's the appropriate thing to do for the public.
Yeah, and obviously try and right-size it, so to speak, so that you don't have a whole bunch of extra copies that go unused.
And you still have your...
No,
you
I'm
still
done.
have your light on? You're looking like you're going to pounce. Anything else? Well, Peter, thank you again for being here. Kristen, thank you as always.
Did you want to go through the agendas? Or?
I'm perfectly willing to do that. I've got a list talking about the golf course, talking about the connectivity in the foothills, talking about CEQA.
So in what you have in front of you, there's the agenda item schedule.
Yes.
So for July, Jack Morton from Parks and Rec Foundation is coming to give, just a basic talk on their role, and you can share with them what you think the commission's priorities might be. And then Darren will be giving an update on the Foothills Park Trail reroute project. The other two items are budget related, and there's an additional one that we're adding, which is just to provide an update on muni fees or municipal fees for the Community Services Department and any changes that will be happening in fiscal year 19. So we'll group all that together into a fiscal year 19 budget update now that council has adopted the budget.
Is Jack Morton, is that the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation, or have they changed their name to Parks and Recreation?
Oh, it should be Palo Alto Recreation Foundation.
I thought I'd missed something maybe.
And remind me who has the liaison with them right now? You do, Jeff? I might spend a few minutes talking to you about the kind of presentation and what we had with the Palo Alto Parks people, Friends of Parks. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.